topic that might seem like it's not really related to hormones, which is what I normally talk about. But I believe that they actually are very connected, emotions and your hormones or your physical health in general. There's been a lot of research to indicate that your emotional state can have a direct effect on your physical health. And then conversely, if you have something wrong with you physically, then that has an effect on your emotions. One area that I think that there's a special correlation is between your emotions and your hormones. Just think about, like, for us women, how our moods can change, our emotions can change pretty drastically sometimes, just over the course of a month. And you all know what I'm referring to here. So the reason that the specific emotion of grief is at the forefront of my mind right now is that recently I had a biometric scan done to see what kinds of supplements I would need. And it gives you like this report that tells you what sort of like what things it found wrong, what kinds of imbalances that it found, and then what supplements you can take to counteract those issues. And one that came up really high for me that surprised me at the time when I first saw it was the emotion grief. And at first I thought, well, that's weird. Why am I showing grief? And then I thought about it some more and I realized, last summer my grandmother died, which was very difficult. She was just like a rock in our family, kind of a pillar that held everything together. And then, of course, before that, going back a few years now, my husband and I had our 3 miscarriages. And then kind of while all of that was happening and shortly afterward, my husband and I both experienced the near loss of a parent. So there was a lot of feelings, a lot of emotions going on there. And the interesting thing about your emotions is that you may feel like you've dealt with an emotion and that it's not really affecting you anymore. But when it's something big like that, it can actually affect you more than you realize. And it can become a part of your cellular makeup so that it's affecting you even beyond what you realize and beyond what you're thinking about. So as I thought about that more, I realized that I did still have some grief that I was holding to from the loss of our babies, and then of course from the loss of my grandmother. So I want to talk to you about some things that I've personally found effective for dealing with grief, and then I would love it if you all would chime in the comments if you have experienced grief yourself. What have you found effective? What has been useful for you as you've dealt with the big emotions that go along with grief? So the first one, my first tip for dealing with grief is to actually just let yourself grieve. So you're not trying to stuff the emotions inside of yourself. You're not trying to pretend that they don't exist. You're recognizing that grief is a normal process that every human has to go through if they experience a loss. And I'm the kind of person who doesn't like to be really emotional. I tend to kind of stuff it inside myself and kind of deny that it's happening and not want to talk about it. And so what I end up doing is I stuff it and I stuff it and I stuff it until there's so much in there that I explode. And usually what happens is my husband's like, where did that come from? Because I'll be totally calm, and then the next thing you know, I'm like this volcano that's just erupted. And obviously that's not really healthy to be holding on to all of that. So what I've had to consciously do myself is to let myself go through the grieving process, to recognize that it's just something that I need to work through, to let myself feel those emotions and work through them. And the second thing is, while you are working through this grieving process, is to speak truth to yourself. I believe that there's a lot of power in our words and in the thoughts that we think, whether they are negative thoughts or positive thoughts. Our thoughts can really affect so much about us. So if you're speaking truth to yourself instead of lies to yourself, you'll make a lot more progress in dealing with grief. So some things that I had to be speaking to myself as I was dealing with grief, and as I was tempted to just focus on the negative things and on the pain that went along with the loss. Things like life will go on. And I know that sounds really trite, like, oh, you just lost someone really important to you and you're just saying, oh, life will go on, it's no big deal. But that's not really what I'm referring to. Just the idea that you will experience happiness again, even if it doesn't feel like you will right now. There will be happy days that will come again. You will always love what you have lost. So you can focus on the good that you experienced with that loved one, whether with the babies that we lost, just focusing on like the joy that we felt in knowing that there was new life, and reflecting on that good, and then just like letting yourself experience the love for that person or that thing that you have lost, and then recognizing that there is growth in grief. So reminding yourself that something good will come of this. You will be a better person for it. Even if, again, it doesn't feel like it in the moment, there are positive things that can come out of the negative things in our life. It's like, you've probably heard this analogy before, but it's like the diamond that has to experience all of this pressure on it to produce something beautiful. But when that pressure comes, something beautiful comes out of it. And then as a Christian, I have this hope that I will see my loved ones again in heaven. And so that was another truth that I really clung to through the grief and the pain of losing our loved ones. Another tip is to talk it out with somebody that you trust, somebody that you love. Or, maybe you go to see a counselor, or you have group therapy sessions. I have a friend who goes regularly to group therapy sessions. And you just, that openness, that talking about it, that's part of the whole process of letting yourself grieve. And then being with other people who have experienced the same thing as you and talking about your feelings and the emotions that go into it, it really combats the feeling of isolation. Like, when you go through something really hard, you tend to have this feeling that you're the only person who's ever experienced it. You feel really lonely. At least that's been my experience. But when you talk to someone else who's been there, it really completely removes that feeling of isolation, and there's a lot of encouragement in not being alone. And then you'll find that when you can share your story with other people and share what's helped you and help them grow through their grieving experience, that it will actually be very healing to you as well. As I've shared my story with others, it's helped me to delve into what the whole experience meant for me and how I've grown through it. And it's been very healing for me. And then talking to my husband, I talk to my husband a lot, and if I'm not feeling the whole speaking truth to yourself thing, and I'm, being all down about it, life is terrible, and whatever else that you say to yourself when you're feeling your worst, he tends to be very encouraging to me and to remind me of things that I know are true. So that can be another added benefit of talking to other people when you're going through grief. The final thing that I want to talk about here is to guard your health, because we talked about that mental, that emotional and body connection, that mind-body connection. It's really important to be taking care of your physical health if you're going through something that's emotionally traumatizing. So some of the obvious ones, make sure that you're still getting exercise, even if all you can handle is a short walk around the block. Something is better than nothing. And I know that can be hard to do. It can be hard to get yourself up off the couch when all you want to do is sit and be sad. And I totally understand that. But that exercise is going to do so much good for you. Getting outside, getting out in the sunlight, making sure that you're eating right, eating healthy foods, and not giving into the temptation to binge, which I also totally understand. Definitely happens as well. And then there are also supplements that you can take that can help to boost your emotions, to support your emotions and just your whole body. Some that I have found specially suited for emotional support that I've used myself are vitamin D, and that kind of goes back to the getting outside thing. You've got the sunlight that produces vitamin D, and you're taking vitamin D to help boost your emotions, so those definitely go together. And then one of my favorites is to use essential oils, and especially like the citrus oils. They're very uplifting and encouraging. Let's see, there's a blend called Joy that I especially like that has several citruses in it. It has ylang ylang, which is also a very uplifting one, and it smells really good. I think of it as like a floral bubblegum smell, which I may be the only person that thinks that, because I've not found anyone else that feels the same way, but I think it smells really good. And frankincense is very grounding. It's really good for spiritual uplifting, for like that focus, helping your emotions. And then another good one that I've really appreciated as I've been processing all of this myself is Idaho Blue Spruce, which smells like trees, of course, because it's spruce, and I really like trees, so it's like really uplifting for me there, because I feel like I'm in the woods or something. But then it's also been shown to help with your emotional balance, as well as a whole slew of other things. One thing you do want to make sure of if you're using essential oils for mind body support like that is you do want to make sure that you're finding pure oils that are undiluted, unadulterated, that are of maximum potency, so that they can actually be effective and not just smell good, because if they just smell good, they're not necessarily doing a whole lot for you. So the oils that I use are grown by a company that owns their own farms, and they do all of their own testing to make sure that everything is of the highest potency and that it's pure. They won't sell it if it's not pure, if it's not potent enough. If you want to know more about that, if you're interested in knowing more about the oils that I use that I've personally found to be the most effective, go ahead and leave me a comment or send me a message, and I would love to talk to you more about that. In the meantime, I hope you all have a great weekend. And again, I would love to hear your comments about, what kinds of grief you've dealt with or how you've dealt with it, your thoughts about what I've gone over today. I will talk to you all later, and have a great weekend.